So I saw someone say that they made Ed Gein sound like Winnie the Pooh, and now I just can't unhear it.
Oh, bother.
What's up, hooligans? Welcome back to another TV show review. Today we are talking about the third installment of Monster, the Ed Gein Story. Now, I didn't watch the second season about the Menendez brothers, but I did watch the first season of Jeffrey Dahmer, and I also watched the American Crime Story about Johnny Versace, or rather the guy who killed Johnny Versace, and I remember really liking those two shows. I'm also a huge fan of Glee, and so I definitely like some of Ryan. Oh my gosh, I was about to call him Ryan Gosling, but no, Ryan Murphy. I enjoy some of his work, but there's also been a bunch of flops in the past. And I have to say, this is one of those flops. And to me, it was like actually so bad, it genuinely felt like I was wasting my life away watching the show. And the only reason I watched it was to get this review out. And even then, I still had to like fast forward through a bunch of the show, at least towards the end, because I just could not bear watching any more of it. And with that being said, obviously I did not like this show, but let's just start off with the positives, because I'm gonna pull at straws and find some good things to talk about. And also, this is a good time to give you that spoiler warning. I will be talking about everything that happens in the show, even though it's based on history, so like you should know what happens already. So yeah, that was your spoiler warning in case you wanted to watch it for yourself, even though I would not recommend it. To start off, one thing that I did enjoy about the show was the performance from Charlie. He did make Ed Gein feel very creepy. He made him feel like an adult child, and that voice is very particular, but I think it got really annoying really fast. I also think they did some kind of prosthetic with his eye, because it feels like one eye is like more closed than the other. I don't know if that is actually like how he looks and how like if he does that, but I thought that was like well done, and I think that made him look more creepy. I also think he had to do a lot of like crazy, absurd scenes. That's the thing. Ryan Murphy has this strange pattern of casting hot, conventionally attractive people, especially men particularly, and he makes them do very disgusting, despicable things in his shows. And yet a lot of people, still find the actors very attractive. And I think the point of that, if I'm giving Ryan Murphy more credit than he probably deserves, but I think the point of that is to make the audience kind of like look inwards and like feel uncomfortable by the fact that they do find the actors attractive, even though they're portraying like really gross people. But to be fair, I'm sure there are plenty of people that do not feel guilty about finding these characters attractive. I remember the amount of people simping over Evan Peters when he was playing Jeffrey Dahmer. So also, Addison Rae was in this show, which was a little surprising. I guess she has been doing more acting recently, and I guess she's trying to become a little bit of a scream queen herself, because she was also in Thanksgiving, which was a pretty good horror movie. I think Addison Rae did fine. Like, good for her for getting an acting opportunity and like doing good enough. I just think the issue is her face, and this is like as a compliment. I think she has a very conventionally, good looking face, a good face, but it's very modern looking. And so it was like taking me out of the time period. It was supposed to be like mid 1900s, and she just has like a very TikToker face. And maybe it's just my association with her from TikTok. It was just kind of distracting. But I will say her death scene was probably the most horror movie-esque thing about this whole show, and I thought it was like one of the scarier parts and probably one of my favorite moments from the entire show. And speaking of TikTokers, Charlie Hall was also in this show. He played one of the police members. He makes like funny TikToks, and I just like couldn't take him seriously either. And I think this is just my fault for being chronically online and like knowing these people from TikTok, so it was like kind of distracting. But in my defense, I also don't think Charlie did that good of an acting job, but like good for him for having this opportunity. I actually do think the craziest part of the whole Ed Gein story, though, was the fact that one of the women that he killed ended up having a son who was a deputy, which kind of led to his downfall. I thought, because that was also true to real life, I thought that was like one of the craziest parts. And then of course that led to them going into his house and finding all of the objects that he made, and I thought that scene was really well done as well. And the other part of the show that was well done was the horror elements. Like I said, the whole Addison Rae death scene was good. I do think the creepiest part was just Ed Gein's obsession with human skin. Seeing him wear like a human bodysuit and then like a mask made out of someone's face, those were all very disturbing. But then all the other stuff was just like, it was gross, but it wasn't scary. It was just like really gross. And I would not recommend watching the show while you're eating something, because I was eating and my appetite was disappeared very quickly, let's just say that. So there is a lot of like style and a lot of gross stuff going on, but I feel like it's all fluff and there's no substance underneath that. Like the writing itself was just not good. I actually think one of the scariest parts was seeing Ed Gein interact with the children that he was babysitting. Like that made me really uncomfortable. I think that was probably like top 3 scariest parts. I think another good part of the show was the first episode, and I only think that because I didn't know what was coming up for the next 7 hours. It showed how he killed his brother, which might not have happened in real life, and how he interacted with his mom. It was just a lot of setup, and I thought the rest of the show was going to be exploring his psyche and going into how he kills his victims next, but I was mistaken. And lastly, I do think one of the more interesting things they did for Ed Gein's character was that he was inspired by Nazis killing people and seeing photos of that, and that kind of like triggered his killer instincts, because I feel like other serial killers, you see them playing with roadkill or animals, and that's how they kind of go into killing people. So this was like a cool perspective, well, not cool, but like different perspective to see how a serial killer was kind of manifested from photographs of other violence. And I think that was part of the social commentary anyway. But what I didn't like, and this is my transition into the parts that I didn't like, is how this fictional comic book character like became a huge part of the show, and there was a lot of time spent with this character. I thought it was just like explaining why he became interested in killing people, but then it became this whole like subplot, and like the comic character of the Nazi. I don't even know if I'm supposed to be saying Nazi this many times. Okay, my mistake. This Nazi is actually not completely made up. She's based on the real life person Ilsa Koch, who was a high-ranking Nazi rumored to have made lampshades out of human skin and also did a bunch of other atrocious things. So I guess that's why they wanted to make the connection between Ed Gein and her. I really didn't like that. I felt like it was so disconnected and unnecessary. Like, I understand the commentary about the Nazi stuff. Like, it's showing that people back then were desensitized by all the violence that was going on, and people wanted to seek out like more violence as entertainment, which is why like Ed was reading these comics, and then that inspired him, which is like commentary about modern day where we're seeking more violent content and yada yada. It's like a cycle, right? But does that mean that we needed to go through a whole subplot about this comic book character? I don't think so. And I do think that was like a general problem of this show, is that there was just so much filler. Honestly, I think this show could have been 4 episodes. That would have been a perfect amount, a limited series to showcase the story of Ed Gein, what it was titled. But no, it went on for 8 episodes, 8 hours of it was just crap. Like, again, I had a really hard time finishing the show, and I don't think I would have finished it if I wasn't reviewing it. So another big problem of this show, and I think a lot of people are also talking about this, is just how much of Ed Gein's life was sensationalized and completely fabricated. And I do think it is sometimes to the benefit of the show, like making it almost like a horror movie. And I don't mind that there are parts that are dramatized, because this is, you know, a show and not necessarily a documentary, right? For example, like he actually didn't kill that many people in real life. He killed 2 people, and the show made him kill a lot more people, including like his brother, which may or may not have happened. Also, Addison Rae's death was never confirmed that it was Ed Gein killing her, but like for the drama, you know, it did kind of make it better. But when it became the entire story of his life basically was dramatized and made up, that's kind of where I had an issue with it. Because at that point, these characters that are based on real life people just completely becomes fantasy. They might as well have been Freddy Krueger or Ghostface or Dexter. Like none of it mattered anymore because it was entirely fiction. It was not based in reality, and so why would I care about these true crime events? Like Adeline's character, she was a real person, but her plot line was almost entirely made up. When she was like basically an accomplice of Ed Gein and she knew what was going on, that did not happen at all. And also the romance plot line with one of the women that Ed Gein killed, that didn't happen either. Like these are very big plot points in the show that are completely made up. And obviously there's like some like ethical questions about, is it okay to completely make up these lies about real life people, real life victims? And does time make this more okay to lie about people's lives? I mean, this event happened a little bit earlier than say like Jeffrey Dahmer or the Menendez brothers, so it is a question to think about. And on the topic of Adeline, she herself in the show at least was kind of a freak. Like first of all, I thought she was just kind of like young and naive. She wanted to get married to someone that she had met for like a couple of days. And like I don't know how charming Ed Gein was in real life. I can't imagine he was very. I was like, girl, you need to set your standards a little higher than Ed. I'm sure there are plenty of people that are better than him. But then we kind of got more into her story in the show, and I was like, oh, right, this is also a psychopath. Like she was the one that suggested Ed Gein go, how do I put this lightly, sleep with a dead body, which apparently Ed Gein did not do in real life, allegedly, because he thought the smell was too gross, which makes sense. But in the show, he sure did it quite a few times. And then Adeline like brutally assaulted this hotel manager, but to be fair, she was like a bad person also. And then she became a scam reporter that was trying to get attention for her association with Ed Gein. She just like became such an unlikable person, and I did not enjoy seeing her on screen. So going into the show, I actually didn't know that much about Ed Gein, but then I did like a quick Google search, a Wikipedia search, and I found out most of the things that we saw in the show were lies. But that's not my point. My point is I knew that he inspired things like Psycho and Texas Chainsaw and Buffalo Bill and Silence of the Lambs. These things that were inspired by Ed Gein became an actual part of the show. And what I meant by that was that Alfred Hitchcock and Anthony Perkins, who played Psycho, and also the people who made Texas Chainsaw, they were like actual characters in this show. At first I thought I was like, okay, that's fine. It's like an acknowledgement of the inspiration in pop culture. But then it kept going as a big part of it, and I did not feature this. Like it just was so distracting, and I thought this was the story about Ed Gein, not the story about other people who were inspired by Ed Gein. Also, the person who played Alfred Hitchcock, I don't know if it was the prosthetic like chin, it just looked really bad. He just looked so cheesy. I did not like that either. All of this like meta Hollywood references, it was a little bit self-indulgent, I feel like, and it was honestly kind of pretentious. And I do, like, I understand the commentary. Again, like, I get what they're doing. They're trying to make reference to like how psychopaths, even though they're horrible people, people are like obsessed with true crime, obsessed with serial killers. It becomes a part of pop culture, right? I get it, but like, we didn't need this to become a whole plot point in the show. And the part about Anthony Perkins being like closeted in Hollywood, and then he was talking to his therapist and saying, am I a monster for being gay? Like, I don't understand what the point of that conversation was. But like, was the point of that trying to say that people who were perceived or who were gay were perceived as monsters back in the day? Like, is that the point of the conversation? And the fact that he was like a monster too, like, I just did not understand that conversation. I didn't like it either. And I also found it kind of funny, and not in the good way, that Ryan Murphy is basically saying that Psycho, Texas Chainsaw, you know, they were all inspired by Ed Gein into their own versions of killers. But then this show made Ed Gein inspired by like Texas Chainsaw and Psycho, which was inspired by like the real life Ed Gein. So this show is like an impression of Ed Gein. Also, another thing that I really did not like, and I don't know if this is like too woke of me or whatever, excuse me, you're being too woke, was that they were trying to say Ed Gein was trans, which there was no like actual evidence that he was trans. Like, him trying to dress up as his mother and putting on like female skin suit, that was like a fetish. Like, that is not him being trans. And I feel like that like implication that he was trans is just really harmful to like the actual idea of being trans. I don't know. I was uncomfortable by that. I don't know if anyone else like had any thoughts on that. And then the very last episode, which I was so out of it by then, also pissed me off because it was not really a conclusion of his story and everything. It was focusing on the other serial killers that came after Ed Gein, and he was the godfather of these serial killers. And it almost made him seem like he was part of the reason why Ted Bundy was like captured, because they were asking him questions about his motives and da 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 da. I did not like that at all, because like why is the tone of the last episode like he did something inspiring and like his legacy was like important and that will not ever be forgotten? It almost just felt like the tone of the last episode was not condemning him. It almost like was uplifting him. Because he was so important to the foundations of horror and pop culture. Like, it almost felt like it was trying to convince the audience that he somehow like wasn't as bad as he was, but he was bad. But yeah, those were most of my thoughts. I really thought this was a weak season, a weak show, and it just convinces me Ryan Murphy does not still got it. I think he needs to go back to making like stupid, funny shit like Glee. If you have not watched the show, please save yourself of the 8 hours of misery. If you want to see like the gore and the disgusting parts, I'm sure you could find like a compilation of that. But warning, it is like also really gross, so I don't know why you would want to see that. So in summary, the acting was fine, the horror parts were fine, Addison Rae was fine. Everything else, it was shit from a butt. But I want to know what you guys thought. Leave a comment letting me know if you agreed with my points or if you absolutely love this show and you think Ryan Murphy is a genius. But either way, I want to hear from you. And in the meantime, I will see you in the next video. Hey hooligans, thanks for watching this video. If you enjoyed this review, then make sure you leave a like, a comment, and subscribe. And check out some of these other videos available right now.